បាទខ្ញុំបាទជនជាតិបុតស៊ូមជម្រាបសួរលោកអ្នកនាងកញ្ញាជាទីមេត្រីខ្ញុំបាទពេលនេះហើយនឹងក្រុមការងារកំពុងតែនៅពីមុខទីចាត់ការធំរបស់អង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិនៅឯបូរីញូវយ៉កហើយនៅពេលបន្តិចទៀតនេះស្ថានបេសកកម្មរបស់សហរដ្ឋអាមេរិករួមជាមួយនឹងប្រតិភូរបស់សហភាពអឺរ៉ុបនឹងរៀបចំពិធីមួយដើម្បីស្ដាប់សក្ខីកម្មរបស់តំណាងគណៈបកសង្គ្រោះជាតិរបស់អង្គការសង្គមស៊ីវិលជាតិនិងអង្គការអន្តរជាតិជុំវិញបញ្ហានៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាជាពិសេសការធ្លាក់ចុះនៃលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យនៅកម្ពុជាវាគ្មិនដែលចូលរួមនោះគឺមានកញ្ញាកឹមមនុវិទ្យាដែលជាកូនស្រីរបស់លោកកឹមសុខាមានលោកប៉ាងួនទៀងដែលជាប្រធានវិទ្យុ VOD មានពីតំណាងរបស់អង្គការសិទ្ធិមនុស្សអន្តរជាតិឃ្លាំមើលសិទ្ធិមនុស្សអន្តរជាតិ Human Rights Watch មានតំណាងពីខាងសហភាពអឺរ៉ុបហើយនិងពីតំណាងរបស់សហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកផងដែរហើយក៏សូមជម្រាបផងដែរថាអ្នកស្រី Rona Smith ដែលជាអ្នករាយការណ៍ពិសេសស្ដីពីបញ្ហាសិទ្ធិមនុស្សនៅកម្ពុជានឹងអ្វីត្បិតតែអ្នកស្រីមិនបានមកចូលរួមផ្ទាល់ក៏ដោយចុះយើងទទួលដំណឹងថាអ្នកស្រីក៏បានបញ្ជូនសេចក្តីថ្លែងការណ៍របស់អ្នកស្រីដែលនឹងអានជូនដល់អង្គជំនុំនាពេលបន្តិចទៀតនេះហើយក្រុមការងារយើងខ្ញុំក៏នឹងទៅចូលរួមថតផ្ដិតយកសកម្មភាពព្រមទាំងខ្លឹមសារនៃកិច្ចប្រជុំនោះហើយយើងខ្ញុំនឹងចាក់ផ្សាយជូនលោកអ្នកនាងដូចតទៅបាទសូមអរគុណ
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. I'm Joe Adamson. I'm the deputy head of the EU delegation here in New York. Thank you for coming to this important event. Let me maybe just sort of set the context as we see it before I hand over to others. I think for me the most important aspect of this meeting is to have a place where we can discuss how to strengthen Cambodia's developing democratic systems. And we very much see the event as a contribution of support for successful elections next year. So I would like to sort of open that. That's the spirit in which we co-host the meeting. This is about support to Cambodia. It's not about support to particular political institutions or individuals. And so you will hear the EU here in New York in many events expressing our support in general to inclusive institutions, to democracy. So I very much hope that the discussion can be seen in that supportive way for Cambodia as a whole. And with that, let me make, if you'll allow me to make some opening remarks about how the EU sort of sees the current position and events in Cambodia. So what I would say is we do have concerns about the political situation in Cambodia and the space that may or may not be available for civil society and the opposition. So we have underlined that the decision by the Cambodian government in November to dissolve a main opposition party is a step away from the path of pluralism and democracy that we see enshrined in Cambodia's constitution and which has been supported for more than 2 decades by Cambodia's international partners, including the European Union. There have been some statements to put that into a clearer perspective. One is the European Parliament resolution just passed on the 14th of December about Cambodia. And I would also note that the High Representative Federica Mogherini met with the Cambodian Foreign Minister Prak Sokhon in the margins of the ASEM ministerial meeting in Myanmar, where she insisted on the expectation that the continued detention of the opposition leader Kem Sokha and the dissolution of the CNRP would be swiftly reversed. The High Representative recalled that the EU's development cooperation and trade preferences were reliant on Cambodia's respect for human rights. And as I mentioned at the start, we're very focused on how we can support the electoral process next year, how we can support developing democratic institutions. So we have underscored that we expect the electoral process to be legitimate and we want to ensure that all voters are enfranchised to choose the parties that they wish to vote for. So we're currently assessing the situation in terms of our development cooperation, but we have already decided at this point to suspend our support for the National Elections Commission. And just in closing remarks, we really do encourage not just the Cambodian government, but all parties to find a way out of this impasse and to have a more structured dialogue with all parties in the opposition. We will continue to discuss with our Cambodian friends, be that government or civil society or opposition, how we can create this political space. I insist on this, that what the EU does always here in New York or wherever we're working on human rights is to support a political space, a space for dialogue. And as I said in opening, we are also ready to support the government of Cambodia in strengthening Cambodia's developing democratic systems. So I really look forward, sort of in that context, how we can all support the whole of Cambodia, how we can support that, to hearing from the views from panelists here today. And very much look forward to hearing from people from Cambodia, but also other international partners on how they see the situation. I thank you very much, and I hand over to Ambassador Curry.
Thank you, Ambassador Adamson. Thank you so much. And I really want to express our gratitude to the EU's observer mission here in New York for co-sponsoring this event with the U.S. mission to the UN. It's our pleasure to welcome all of you to US-UN. We're glad you're here, and thank you for your interest in this important topic today. We are here to discuss what we see, as my colleague Ambassador Adamson outlined, as a worrying trend. What we see as the deterioration of democracy in Cambodia. And I want to align us with the remarks that she gave about how this is not about a particular political party or a particular individual, while you will hear certainly about problems regarding the main opposition party and its leadership. But this is about the disenfranchisement of the Cambodian people, the effort to remove their choices and their voices from the discussion about Cambodia's future. And that is what concerns us as a longstanding partner in Cambodia's process of political reconciliation, democratization, and economic development. As evidenced by the number of Cambodian Americans in the room today, you can see that our people-to-people ties with Cambodia are very strong with between the United States. And thus, these recent setbacks in Cambodia's democratic development are especially troubling. Helping Cambodia get back on track, as Joanne said, is why we're here today. Since the signing of the 1991 Paris Peace Accords, we saw that as a watershed moment in Cambodia's history, as most Cambodians did. It laid the groundwork to end a brutal and bloody conflict that had nearly destroyed the country for over 20 years. And the key to that was the establishment of a multi-party democratic political system to escape from the past. It was anchored in human rights and the rule of law. While the period since 1991 has seen many ups and downs as Cambodia struggled to achieve these ideals, overall we have seen progress. A free, independent media and vibrant civil society had begun taking root, and citizens' awareness of their rights in the country had blossomed, as demonstrated by their growing participation in civic and political life. As recently as June, Cambodia held commune council elections that were considered widely to be the freest since the early 1990s, and which showed dramatic gains by the opposition. But over the past year, we've also watched with dismay as there have been other more troubling developments in the political and human rights situation in Cambodia. The recent downturn really picked up steam with the shuttering and expulsion of independent media and civil society organizations. This crackdown took on a more ominous turn in September with the politically motivated arrest of Kem Sokha, the leader of the Cambodian National Rescue Party. Last month, the Cambodian Supreme Court, at the government's request, dissolved the CNRP, the main opposition party of Cambodia, on baseless and politicized allegations. an action which has all but destroyed the credibility of Cambodia's upcoming National Assembly elections scheduled for July 2018. As Special Rapporteur Rona Smith recently said, the opposition must be allowed to exist and to function without fear or intimidation. Democracy is about voice and choice. These moves risk leaving many Cambodians without either. The United States and the international community are greatly concerned about Cambodia's abrupt reversal in course. Our panelists today either have been personally affected by the democratic downturn or have been at the forefront of documenting it. First, Mona Kem, daughter of Kem Sokha and the Deputy Director General of Public Affairs and member of the CNRP. Mona oversees the Departments of International Relations and Civil Society Engagement, as well as the CNRP's Women's Wing. After she speaks, we will hear from Mr. Pa Nong Taeyong. Mr. Taeyong is the founder and executive director of the Cambodian Center for Independent Media and the Voice of Democracy radio station. He has been sued by the Cambodian government on politically motivated charges and was banned from broadcasting in August. John Sifton, the Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch, is also with us this morning to share his perspective on the situation and provide recommendations for what can be done to reverse this troubling trend in Cambodia. Finally, we have a statement provided by Rona Smith, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Cambodia. Unfortunately, Special Rapporteur Smith was unable to join us by video conference today as planned. So with her permission, we will be reading her statement for your information. Afterwards, as time permits, we'll have some time for question and answers before wrapping up. And again, I want to thank our colleagues from the delegation of the European Union for co-sponsoring us and for their participation today. Finally, I want to remind everyone here that this event is on the record. And with that, I will pass the floor to Mona. And thank you all again for joining us.
I just want to mention, you might want to pull the microphones a little closer. I don't think everyone is hearing us.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And speak right in.
First of all, I want to thank Ambassador Curry and Ambassador Adamson for organizing this very important discussion. And especially, I want to thank some representatives of some countries that are signatories of the Paris Peace Accords that are present today. Your presence are extremely important to the surviving of Cambodia's democracy in the coming weeks, actually, in the coming weeks. And why is it so important that we are here? Here, not exactly at the U.S. mission, but here at the UN is where the Paris Peace Accord was born. And now, over 26 years, peace accord have been violated by the Cambodian ruling elites through their absolute control of Senate, the judiciary system, the whole judiciary system, the military, and also even the anti-corruption unit. All of these have been used as tools to crack down on not only the opposition party, but also civil society and media. So what's so important about the Paris Peace Accord? I would not go into discussion about all the details, but the number one thing, it's supposed to guarantee a multi-party democracy in Cambodia. And Cambodian government, the Cambodia party, we signed on to this. And also some of your countries who are here today, I'm not sure which countries are represented today, you signed on to that. So we all have obligation to protect the spirit of the Paris Peace Accord and to make sure it is being implemented. And now I can tell you that all the elements, all the pillars that would support a multi-party democracy have been dismantled, especially in the last 3 months. Mainly the dissolution of the only main viable opposition party that had seat in the National Assembly, the Cambodia National Rescue Party. And number 2, the arrest of the leader, Kem Sokha, who is now in prison for about 109 days already in illegal detention. And number 3, the continued crackdown on civil society. Now they are working in fear, and some of them are facing charges. And number 4, the crackdown and the shutdown of some independent media, more than a dozen of free independent stations. And some of the journalists that we see here are actually facing politically motivated lawsuit. So those are all the pillars of multi-party democracy. So if we don't have that, you cannot pretend. We cannot pretend that there is democracy. We cannot pretend that the Paris Peace Accord is being implemented. So I am here mainly to urge member states, especially those that have signed on into the Paris Peace Accord, to enforce the Paris Peace Accord spirit again, and you have an obligation again. You have an obligation as well as the Cambodia party, as well as our government. We have obligation to make sure that the spirit of the accord is respected. And so how can we do that going forward? I won't list all the violations. I just listed the main ones. We need the member state to start pushing the United Nations for some action. And we have seen a lot of statements already. We've seen it from the Human Rights Commissioner, the High Human Rights Commissioner here. And, but we need more than statement at this point. You see from the EU, from the US, they have started, as a country, they have an institution, they have started taking action, but we have not yet to see anything from the UN in terms of something concrete. And we need the UN to get on board with this, because this is not just about this is not just about the opposition party. It's about a multi-party democracy that is at risk. So I will be quick and propose what I think member states in regard to the United Nations mechanism can do. Number one, I would propose that the member state encourage that Cambodia issue would be on the agenda of the General Assembly in January, if possible. Number two, I would propose that the member state, especially those who have signed on to the Paris Peace Accord, send a request to the UN Secretariat for a fact-finding mission, monitoring mission to Cambodia to assess the situation now and to talk to the Cambodian authority to find solution in regard to the Paris Peace Accord. And number three, I would request that the member state, I would request that the member state request to the UN body to review Cambodian membership at the UN. Because after, in 1997, after the coup, and this is very similar to 1997, after the coup, I think Cambodian membership was being suspended. And in some way, if I may add, in some way, this is a lot worse than 1997. It's a different kind of coup. For example, the redistribution of elected position by our party that have been redistributed to smaller party and the ruling party. So why are we even here pretending that we're going to have an election in 2018 when it's very clear that the ruling elites right now, they have shown in Cambodia, they have shown that they have zero respect for election. In June of this year, we had a pretty free and fair election that all parties accepted, and I think it was congratulated by the international community. But yet, months later, those elected seats were stolen from us. So how would we have confidence that going to 2018, that the election, first of all, would be free and fair, which is not because all the pillars have been dismantled. And number two, even if it was free and fair in 2018, how do we expect that the result will not be robbed from us again? So this is the job of the UN. I think it has to do with guaranteeing peace and security as well in Cambodia, in the region, as well as in the region. So I want to summarize that it is very important that member states begin to act, and we need to see action beyond statement. I'm happy to answer any question and to hear any remark from everyone's here, especially representative from the countries that have signed on to the Paris Peace Accord. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
Thank you, Ambassador Curry and Ambassador Adamson, who organized this event, and a great honor to be here. Yeah, I don't want to repeat what happened in Cambodia. I think many of you know that. But I just want to draw attention to some points. Since the last August, I think there is a turning point for Cambodian civil society, media, and the opposition party who face a stronger systematic crackdown from the government by not only targeting the individual or the institution member, but also targeting the institution. For example, the closure of the IDI, the closure of the number of 32 radio stations nationwide, and closure of the opposition party, etc. But I want to highlight that the government always tell the world that the Cambodia has freedom by counting the number of the institutions, for example, like media, radio, more than 300 of radio stations, but all the TV stations, all the radio stations, and more of the media are strongly controlled and influenced by the government. But here, what I want to highlight is the point that why the media and civil society has been cracked down. There are a few points. One is the media, more of the media are strongly controlled by the government, but there are few media like VA IFA and VD and Cambodia, Delhi and Phnom Penh, etc. that are working to provide the alternative information to the people. And so this is something that exposes what happened in the country. While there are a lot of social problems, including corruption and human rights violation. And that one point. The other point, the civil society are working to empower people to freely express the idea and demand for better change. And this is something that the government see that we are working to empower people. And when people are empowered, people find a way to change or demand better change. And then the government think that this is something that benefits the opposition. And then the government accuse civil societies, the free media, independent media, as working for the benefit of the opposition. And that is the reason that the government crack down the independent media and opposition party. No, and civil society. And another point I also want to highlight that why the opposition leader Kamsaka arrested and why the only opposition party CNP dissolved. There are a few points that I want to raise here. Usually the ruling party easily got the landslide victory of election since 1998, but until the election in July 2013, the ruling party CP got a big loss, and it was the first time in the history that the ruling party got the big loss, and that surprised everyone, including the CVP. And according to the figure that the number of the vote that the CPP and the opposition party CNP got in 2013, there are only few % different. While the CPP got the 49%, the opposition got the 45% of vote. So there are only 4% different. So first, they lost the number of seats in the 2013 election, and this means that it is the first time that CP faced the stronger challenge in the history of election competition. And the second point, the last June commune election, CP faced another loss of the election. They got many seats lost, and this is the second time that CP also faced another loss. So you see the trend of the ruling party CP. They get lost first time in 2013, and then the second time in the June 2017. And another point, in 2016, while the civil society and the opposition party were banned from conducting the public poll, but at the same time the ruling party, they conducted a public poll. And according to the poll, there are 2 points that I want to show here. There are 2 polls in 2016. One was conducted in May, 2 months before the killing of Dr. Kamlay and a political analyst, outspoken political analyst. And the other one, it was conducted in September 2013. September 2016. That's 2 months after the death. And according to the research, it was found that the popularity of Prime Minister Hun Sen found in May, 2 months before the killing of Dr. Kamlay, and popularity of Prime Minister Hun Sen found in September, 2 months after the killing of Dr. Kamlay, dropped from 49% to 35%, 14% decrease. And this means that the violation of human rights, a serious human rights violation, really affect the reputation or popularity of the Prime Minister Hun Sen or the ruling party. And also the survey also showed that with the top current leadership of the CNP, CP will lose the election in 2018 at least 9%. And that's why I think because of this, that probably the CP has no choice to get rid of the leadership of the top leadership of the CNP. And that's why Mr. Kamsaka has to be arrested. That's my analysis. But probably like the killing of Dr. Kamlay, when Kamsaka arrested, maybe the public consider this is another serious human rights violation, and probably this is also seriously affect the popularity of the Prime Minister. And that's why I think the ruling party CP maybe had no choice to dissolve the opposition party. And for me, what do the dissolution of the NLP and the government's crackdown mean? For me, there are 2 points. One, according to the state survey about, it found that one of the priority that people voted for the CNLP in 2013 and was time for change. That also one of the things highlighted in the survey conducted by the CP in 2016, and including the figure of the opposition increasing popularity, as I mentioned about. It might be true for the next July election that the CNLP become the choice for the people. So the dissolution of CNLP is going against the will of the people of Cambodia. And the second point, the Cambodian National Assembly today, for me, misrepresented following the dissolution of the only opposition party won by about 3 million or 45% of the vote in each previous election for National Assembly and communal election. And the elected seats were redistributed by the ruling party to the other party as the ally of the ruling party. And this is, for me, it violated the Article 76 of the country constitution that read, the deputies shall be elected by free, universal, equal, direct, and secret ballot. So the dissolution of the CNLP is the violation of human rights, of the right of the people, about 3 million people who vote for the CNLP. And these rights of the Cambodian people are enshrined in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and protected or granted by the Article 31 of our Constitution. Moreover, this dissolution also undermines the country's pluralism policy by enabling the ruling party to monopolize powers, which violate Article 51 of the Constitution, saying that the Kingdom of Cambodia adopts a policy of liberal and pluralism. So I would aggressively say that the current government is illegitimate. Third, the dissolution of the CNLP and the crackdown on civil society and independent media are breaching Cambodia international commitment enshrined in 1991 Paris Peace Agreement, and also destroying the great effort of the international community for human rights and democracy in Cambodia, where billions of US dollars of various country taxpayer has been invested for that goal since 1992. And for this serious situation, I propose a number of recommendations that the international community should consider and make intervention. With the current serious devolution of democracy in Cambodia and for its restoration, I would propose the international community should, as precondition, push for the release of opposition leader Kem Sokha and the other prisoners of concern before dealing with the other issue. The restoration of the CNLP and the political rights of its 118 leaders, the restoration of freedom of civil society and independent media, the trusted guarantee for free and fair election schedule for next July. I do think that this push is not the act of interference in the internal affairs of Cambodia, but I think that the right act to protect the will and rights of Cambodian people enshrined in UDHR granted by Article 31 of the Constitution. And usually the Cambodian government always tell the world that they always enforce the law, but usually the law are already made by the Cambodian government with the clear objective to crack down the civil society, the independent media, and the opposition. And so I also propose a number of actions that international community should consider. I truly believe that the international community have enough experience in dealing with Cambodian government and capacity in helping Cambodian people currently living with uncertain future by restoring the democracy in the country. However, I would propose the action which should be considered in according to the position of the Cambodian government. First, if possible, holding a meeting of the signatory of Paris Peace Agreement to address the current evolution of democracy in Cambodia and jointly respond to such serious problem right now. And visa restriction on and freezing a set of Cambodian government officials involved in undermining the democracy and violating other human rights, or placing them on the specially designated national list. Using market leverage for deal with the Cambodian government, cutting direct aid to the Cambodian government, suspending Cambodia's seat at the UN. Last but not least, I appreciate for commitment and effort of international community for the sake of human rights and democracy in Cambodia, and also especially thanks to US, EU, and Sweden, who have taken certain concrete steps in response to the current serious situation in Cambodia. Taking the opportunity, I would also call the international community, particularly Japan and Australia, for consideration to take similar action like US, EU, and Sweden. And also for former Paris Peace Agreement co-chairman France and Indonesia, and the US General Secretary to call for meeting on Paris Peace Agreement review. And I just want to highlight two other points about the Japan and the Australia. I think Japan is one of the big donors in Cambodia, and especially Japan provides direct aid to the National Election Committee. And so I think Japan should consider its position right now, because now the National Assembly misrepresents Cambodian people, and also the National Election Committee is not the neutral or balanced committee anymore. It is the committee controlled only by the ruling party. And at the same time, the Australia, I think, should consider a number of concrete actions like I read about, because many of Cambodian government officials take their corrupt money to buy some property and asset in Australia. So I think it is helpful if the Australian government take action against that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name again is John Sifton. I work for Human Rights Watch, which has a staff which has worked on Cambodia for many years, including before working at Human Rights Watch. I'd say probably, can't speak for myself, but our staff cumulatively together probably represents decades and decades of experience working in Cambodia since the 1970s until present. And I speak on their behalf and not just my own. I'm not going to review the deterioration, because I think you can all see it online on our website. You can see it in the EU Parliament statement resolution that came out earlier this month. We have an opposition dismantled. We have a media that's been thoroughly intimidated, including broadcast media. I see in front of me a Voice of America and a Radio Free Asia microphone. These are services which the Cambodian government has forced independent radio stations on the ground to cease broadcasting, and has forced some of the journalists who work for these institutions to stop working, and has put them under criminal investigation. We have a civil society that's been extremely weakened. So it's a terrible situation, and it's different from past crackdowns that we've seen in Cambodia. But I want to explain, I don't want to go through all the details and facts about that. I would like to explain the theory of change now that human rights groups and others are presenting as to how to change this or mitigate it. But before doing that, I just want to reiterate, Human Rights Watch is not a partisan institution. We are an independent human rights group. We don't support people or parties. We don't support governments. In fact, we've often criticized governments even as we work with them to promote human rights in other governments. You can look on our website. Human Rights Watch severely criticizes the British government and the U.S. government for human rights issues under their domain. So we're not partisan, okay? We're not pro-country or anti any country. Our interest is in supporting human rights and democratic norms. Now, with that said, as an organization that that researches and analyzes human rights abuses, we do focus on perpetrators and people and institutions who commit human rights abuses. And in this respect, I have to explain why we are focused so much on the leader of Cambodia, Hun Sen, and his party, the CPP. Again, we're not partisan. We have nothing against particular parties over others. We don't support certain ideologies over others. But the fact of the matter is, Prime Minister Hun Sen and the CPP have ruled Cambodia for decades and have committed numerous human rights abuses over that time. And the current crackdown, in our view, is a wake-up call to the international community to basically come to realize that this man and this party are not good faith actors and need to be dealt with in a less diplomatic way and in more of a transactional way. And that's why, if you look on our website and you see other calls, we are calling for targeted economic sanctions on the leaders of Cambodia, Hun Sen, and leaders of the CPP implicated in human rights abuses and crackdowns. In our view, focusing on them is what will get them to realize that the costs of what they are doing outweigh the benefits that accrue to them in terms of continuing CPP's dominance and not having to worry about the opposition. I think all politicians, even in democratic countries, are annoyed and threatened by political oppositions, and that's part of what democracy is. And that's fine until you act on it and start committing human rights abuses to mitigate or get rid of that annoyance and that threat. So what we need to essentially recognize is that for years, Hun Sen, before the Paris Peace Agreements even came in, was nurtured in a one-party governance system that was designed along the lines of Soviet and Russian and Vietnamese political parties. It was only in 1991 that the Paris Peace Agreements created a framework in which multi-party pluralistic democracy was put upon Cambodia as the model going forward, and Hun Sen signed up for that. But for years, we have seen how, even as he ostensibly supported this UN-supported democratic process and operated within the Paris system, he was always skirting it and sabotaging it and undermining it and manipulating its signatories to ensure his continued rule. Over all those decades since 1991, however, he ostensibly supported the Paris system and supported the idea that Cambodia was a democratic system. You still see sort of a lip service paid to that idea, but with the statements made this year that Paris is over, that Paris is dead, the scales can now fall from our eyes. Hun Sen has revealed that he is what he started as, the leader of a one-party authoritarian state. There's an article in this month's Atlantic magazine by the journalist Molly Ball about the closure of the Cambodia Daily, an English language newspaper there that operated for many years after the Paris Peace Agreements. In that article, I'm quoted somewhat dramatically saying, "Democracy is dead in Cambodia." And that's a pretty harsh statement, but I have to say the one good news is that unlike human beings and animals, democracy can be resuscitated easily. It doesn't. Its death is not forever. Democracy can be resuscitated after it flatlines, and to get back to where we were at the very least, as opposed to getting to a functioning multi-party democracy, actions can be taken, and that's where I'm going to leave this. The very least that concerned countries can do now is to consider our theory of change and the recommendations we're making about putting consequences, real consequences, on Hun Sen and the CPP leadership to make them reconsider what they've done and realize that the benefits of what they're doing outweigh the costs, to the point where they stop acting like autocrats and start at least paying lip service again to the Paris system and allow there to be some opposition. It's only if that opposition continues to be nurtured that it will ultimately become a real thing. So the costs, what are those costs? I would just bear down on this. We've called for targeted economic sanctions. What this means at the UN level, in a perfect world, would be a UN Security Council resolution that imposes targeted sanctions. That's not realistic right now, given that the situation in Cambodia is not a threat to international peace and security as bad as it is. But concerned countries, and in particular Paris signatories, can take action now to impose financial restrictions. The United States government, for instance, has a specially designated nationals list maintained by the Treasury Department. You can be placed on that list if you commit gross human rights abuses or if you're engaged in mass corruption or grand mal corruption. So I think the United States Congress and the United States State Department and the White House can consider adding people to that list, CPP leaders and Hun Sen in particular, and his family members, if they determine that they're implicated in gross human rights abuses or massive corruption. When one is listed on the specially designated nationals list, it doesn't just mean that your assets in U.S. banks get frozen. It means that you get cut off from the international financial network and institutions. I mean, there are many banks, even if they're not U.S. banks, that will refuse to move money or manage funds for people who are on that list. And so it will have a real impact on Cambodian leaders and their families, even if they're banking in Singapore or Australia or elsewhere. The EU system for those types of sanctions is more complicated, but we would propose that they come to an agreement there as well, and that will involve the United Kingdom and France realizing what I've said, that the time has come for the cost to outweigh the benefits to the CPP. But if they do that, that will then cause a whole other set of countries that are outside the EU, but very important, like Switzerland, Norway, Australia, Canada, to follow suit. So, it's very important that the EU take a hard look at whether to start imposing targeted sanctions. In the meantime, the U.S. has already announced that it will be restricting entry and visas for certain people who, for legal reasons, they can't say who those people are, but we can bet that they're, we can suppose that they are, high-level CPP leaders and their families. That's the kind of thing the EU needs to ramp up as well as other countries. Essentially create a reputational cost, an embarrassment to the leadership of the CPP. They can't visit the European Union. They can't visit the United States. Their family members can't visit the United States. Some of them, these types of actions have real impacts on the decision makers of leaders in countries. We've seen that all over the world, Africa and elsewhere. These are the types of measures that get recalcitrant, abusive governments to change their behavior. So again, let me just say, one other thing. Another side thing that should be done in order to raise the stakes, and we should talk about this in the Q&A, is at the UN Human Rights Council, there's a session coming up in March that will focus on Cambodia, where the UN Secretary General via proxy will update the Human Rights Council on situation in Cambodia and the work of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That's an opportunity, for these problems to be highlighted, but we don't think it's enough. We think concerned countries at the Human Rights Council should consider holding a special session at the UN Human Rights Council, either before or perhaps during, that's procedurally difficult, the March Human Rights session. It's very important that countries set the stage for deciding and determining later this year that the elections were not an expression of the free will of the Cambodian people. Because just contingency planning, if none of this works, none of these sanctions work, we're faced with the possibility of a theatrical election in July in which Hun Sen supposedly wins and is an elected leader. It's very important that before that we set the criteria and that concerned countries speak at the Human Rights Council to say what is happening in Cambodia does not allow the July election to be considered free and fair before it even happens. Forget what happens on election day, just that the framework does not allow anything that happens in July to be considered free and fair. So that when July comes, everybody can say, without any controversy, that we said these are what the criteria were, Cambodia didn't meet them, therefore this election was not free and fair. So again, if there's anybody from various missions to the UN here who can report back to Capitol, we are strongly supporting that capitals consider a special session of the UN Human Rights Council before March. So again, look, democracy is dead, but it can be resuscitated. Countries like France, Japan, the rest of them really need to step up here and join other concerned countries to raise the real costs on Cambodia so that they turn away from this authoritarian bent. Thanks.
Again, because Professor Rona Smith, the UN Special Rapporteur, was unable to join us by video conference today, as a Special Rapporteur, she just has provided the statement and asked that it be provided to you as participants. So the statement submitted by Professor Rona Smith, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia for the U.S.-EU Organized Side Event, New York, 19 December 2017. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this side event. I'm not currently in New York, therefore I am submitting this statement on the current political situation in Cambodia. 2017 has brought many challenges for human rights defenders and politicians in Cambodia, though also some successes. On the positive side, in October, Senator Hong Sak-aw received a royal pardon and was released from prison. I also note that Nai Chakra, the Deputy Secretary General of the National Election Committee, was released from pretrial detention in June after 427 days, but he remains under judicial supervision with charges pending. On 4 June, Commune Sangat elections were conducted in a relatively orderly and peaceful manner. There was a high turnout of electorate. Many commentators, including some present today, expressed discontent over the general environment in the lead-up to and indeed after the election. Such concern is well-founded, not least with the range of threats, offensive and intimidating comments from senior political actors. I remain concerned about the dissolution of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, CNRP, on 16 November, the banning of 118 CNRP members from political activity for 5 years, and the reallocation of all the party's local and national seats to unelected members of the ruling and other parties. Whilst I am aware of the fast-tracked laws on reallocation of seats, their invocation has denied a significant portion of the population their right to take part in public affairs through their freely chosen representatives. Those represented by CNRP in the National Assembly have had their votes in effect reallocated to another party. Those voting CNRP in the June 4 Commune Sangat elections in June have also seen changes in their elected officials. That will also have an impact on the forthcoming decisions on appointment to the Senate. International human rights treaties and the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, which was adopted just over 5 years ago in Phnom Penh, guarantee the right to participate in government through free and fair, genuine elections. So too does the Constitution of Cambodia. Restricting Cambodians' political voices could ultimately threaten the stability that the government regularly highlights and that the government, Cambodian people, and many others have worked to protect. Before dissolution of the CNRP, its then leader, Kem Sokha, was detained in September, only days after my last mission to Cambodia, on a charge of conspiracy with a foreign power, an act implying, quote, fomenting hostilities or acts of aggression against Cambodia, unquote. The government has publicly explained that the conspiracy arose from a speech he made in Australia in 2013, which is available online. Despite this, he was claimed to have been arrested in flagrante delicto, therefore obviating the normal processes for removing parliamentary immunity. He was also initially denied many of the legal rights in Cambodian law, including confidential access to his lawyers and the presence of his lawyers during questioning by the investigating judge. It is certainly important for the international community and civil society actors to continue monitoring the situation in Cambodia and to publicly and privately raise concerns with the government. There are many different fora open for this. I continue to use the opportunities offered through my mandate to advocate, monitor, and report in order to assist the government to improve the human rights situation in the country.
Quite contrary to what the Cambodian government claim about stability, their recent violation in the last few months trigger a possibility of instability in the near future. Why? They have made at least half of the Cambodian population their enemy. Why am I saying that? They have robbed their votes. Everyone is under some sort of monitoring or some sort of unofficial investigation. We're talking about the Cambodian National Rescue Party members, even on the ground, I'm not talking about big senior officials, are being followed, are being monitored, either coerced or forced into defection, and if they don't, they are under threats. People on the village level are being watched, and this is really, this is echoing the tactic that was used during the Khmer Rouge. Did we have stability during the Khmer Rouge? One would say yes. But is that stability good for the population, or is that stability going to be long-lasting? That's what's going on right now. And this is not an exaggeration. What's being done now is every Cambodian who is not a supporter of the ruling party is being watched, being monitored, being coerced, being threatened. So yes, stability is at risk. And it is the, I believe again, it's the obligation of the countries that have signed on to the Paris Peace Accord to start enforcing the spirit, reinforcing the spirits of the accord. And I am glad some of you are here today. And again, I don't want to single out some countries, but I think Japan, France, Australia need to really get on board. We see some action from the US. We see some action from the EU. Right now, we need global, synchronized response, and that is why this forum is so important. That this event today, we gather some of the key signatory countries, also in the context of the UN as well. You need to act together. The ruling party does not only try to divide our party or among the opposition. The ruling party, the Cambodian government, also try to divide all of you by playing some country up against the other. And you have to think, why are you still in Cambodia? Why are you in Cambodia? Whether it's Japan, whether it's Australia, what are you trying to promote in Cambodia? What are you defending in Cambodia? All your values, it's not just American value, it's the EU value, it's Japanese values, Australian values are all universal values that are being violated right now by the Cambodian ruling elites. And I would say eventually this also triggers economic instability. Okay, I see that I'm running out of time, so I pass this off.
Go ahead.
The argument that stability is created by what the CPP is doing has a number of logical flaws in it, which I should just unwrap for a second. The notion here is that crushing the CNRP and stamping out civil society is what is responsible for the economic situation in Cambodia such as it is. Well, that's false, because the CNRP has existed for many years and opposition has existed for many years as growth has taken place. Everybody who knows about development in Cambodia knows that it's because of extraordinary generosity by the international community and the international financial institutions and donors like Japan and the United States and the EU providing enormous sums of money for developmental assistance and economic incentives, including the generalized system of preferences in the EU. And all these other things have contributed to the growth of the economic situation in Cambodia. It's not cracking down on human rights that has created prosperity in Cambodia. On the contrary, what we would argue is that that crackdown has probably retarded economic growth from being even greater than it could be, as many entrepreneurs and others have felt that they are unable to compete in what is a very corrupt economic situation, which is there precisely because the political situation isn't as good as it could be. That corruption is emboldened by the political dominance of the CPP. So, I mean, I would ask, how can you argue that the stability is the result of CPP dominance? What we've seen all over the world, not just in Cambodia, but Egypt, all of these countries, is this is the argument time and time again. Stability is ensured by cracking down on opposition. Opposition is going to destabilize the situation, create civil war, create instability, when in fact all they're trying to do is get elected to a parliament. So this argument has always been bogus, and I think we should just, tear off all the pretext and reveal it for what it is, a false argument, an empty argument that has no bearing in logic or reason.
I agree that there has been the economic development around 6 point or 7% annually, but I still concerned about this economic development because it is not sustainable at all. And for me, the current economic development may be because of the foreign aid, because of the natural resource destruction, for example, like forest destruction, mining, something, and it is not sustainable. And one thing. And the other thing, around 5 years ago, probably the report made by the global relief that only 20% of the Cambodian people who own the main profit of the country, and this means that the economic growth is not equally shared among the people in the country. And another indicator is clearly said that around 2 million Cambodian people among at least around 2 million of Cambodian people are jobless. Right now, the 1.1 million and a half are working in Thailand. 150,000 workers are working in South Korea, and another number go to Malaysia, and something like this. And this means that they cannot find a job in the country, and this we don't count the other people who are jobless inside the country. So I think 2 or 3 million people are jobless. So for me, I make a conclusion that there are, of course, economic development, economic growth, but it's not sustainable. It's not the right way that the government is doing development right now. Thank you.
Joe, did you?
We are here today with some representative from some country, which is why we're raising the reason why Cambodia's membership should be suspended, the violation that the Cambodian government has been conducting. So this is the first step, and I think it's very important that people recognize that this crackdown is very similar. In some way, it's worse, minus the bloodshed in 1997 coup. It's very similar. It is a coup. It is a coup, and this time with the opposition leader in prison. And the number 2 question about boycotting election, that's interesting because we don't even exist. So the CNRP does not even exist, so we won't be in the election, whether or not we boycott. But in terms of our position, we are still hopeful. We are still trying. We are still pushing that the reverse, of course, could still happen, and that might possibly can salvage the integrity of the upcoming election. And I'm talking about in the next few weeks. So if that doesn't happen, the integrity of the 2018 election is foregone. We don't have even to wonder if it's going to be credible or not. And with the question to the EU sanction, I would leave that question to Ambassador Adamson, but I would urge that some of the member countries in the EU, number 1, France, need to step up to the plate. France. Because you are one of the main signatories of the Paris Peace Accord, and a very important country, important member of the EU in relation to EU-Cambodia relations. In closing, once again, I'd like to thank Ambassador Curry, Ambassador Adamson for this opportunity. It's very important that the member states are here listening to the panelists today, and we hope that you convey the message to your capital, especially in Tokyo, in Paris, in London,
Canberra.
In Canberra, definitely Canberra, because now we need global response, not just single responses from different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Summing up from the EU perspective, I'm bound to say that almost like on Twitter, retweeting does not mean endorsement of everything said on the panel. So for us, thinking, is this a first step to something? For us, this discussion is about that stepping back from the brink that I think John was talking about, meaning to try to find a way out of the impasse in Cambodia with all the different parties concerned. We're on record sort of over the last few months with different statements and different actions, so I think our commitment to promoting good governance and inclusive dialogue is on question, but I do want to be clear on that, the context in which we're meeting today. And I won't go into details of sanctions because you would fall asleep if I did. Essentially,
I wouldn't.
what happens in Brussels is, it depends on member states. So it isn't just the EU delegation here saying this is how sanctions are done, but there are different sanctions regimes. They do tend to look at what UN sanctions regimes are already in place. So that tends to be one of the starting points where they follow up. So if you look at the different sanctions regime, very often they mirror and enforce and endorse UN sanctions regime. But I don't want to go too far down that track right now, because where I started from in this discussion was us seeing this meeting as an opportunity to urge people to come back together and to see how the elections next year could be held in a more propitious environment. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
All right now is to impose economic restrictions, targeted sanctions on people. The CPP leadership and Hun Sen himself. The time may come where we want to talk about leverage on the Cambodian economy, the generalized system of preferences, agreement with the European Union or other types of economic sanctions, or diplomatic punishments towards the Cambodian government as a government. But right now, our primary aim is to focus on people and perpetrators of human rights abuses. On the issue of boycotting the election, yeah, it's a little bit nonsensical to, no offense, it's nonsensical to talk about the CNRP boycotting the election because they can't participate in it. So you can't boycott what you can't participate in the first place. But I think it is time to talk about donor countries not taking part in the election by monitoring it or supporting it in any way. And that is why we applaud the EU for suspending its involvement and support for the election. And we call on Japan to do the same. Japan, I want to single out this country, which we've worked with so closely in so many other places, and support their efforts in many places. I want to single out Japan for not playing a very productive role in the last few months in supporting strong efforts at the UN and international level on Cambodia. We really need the government in Tokyo to change its frame of reference here and start joining the US and the EU in imposing harder consequences on the Cambodian government. Meanwhile, in the EU, to reiterate this point about France and the United Kingdom could play a very important role in convincing the rest of the EU bloc, including some of the reluctant members like Hungary and Greece, Poland, to go along with a unified position of imposing sanctions. France and the UK could play a great role here, and we really are urging them to play that role. But even countries which aren't France and the UK, like Germany, and even much smaller economies within the European Union, can play a role by demarching or communicating to France and the UK that they ought to do more. And lastly, I just want to single out, back here in the United States, the U.S. Congress down in Washington is considering legislation that would strengthen a lot of the restrictions and potential sanctions on Cambodian leaders. And so it's very important that members of the House and Senate who have not yet taken a look at that legislation that's pending to look at it and considering passing it out of Congress and pushing it towards the president to sign so that the president has to impose tougher sanctions on the Cambodian government. Cambodia, despite all of the problems it's had, is one of the few countries down in Washington where there is broad bipartisan agreement about human rights issues. Frankly, I haven't seen it in many other countries in the world outside of just a few in the region. Republicans and Democrats agree that there has been a systematic undermining of democracy and that action needs to be taken. It's just a question of them now passing legislation that would both authorize and compel the president and the White House to act.
Panelists for their participation. Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
បាទលោកនាងជាទីមេត្រីដោយលោកនាងបានជ្រាបហើយកិច្ចប្រជុំទើបនឹងបានចប់អំបញ្ញមិញនេះហើយយើងខ្ញុំសូមទោសផងដែរដែលហេតុថាភាសានៃកិច្ចប្រជុំនេះគេប្រើជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសក៏ប៉ុន្តែយ៉ាងណាក៏ដោយចុះយើងខ្ញុំក៏នឹងធ្វើសេចក្តីសង្ខេបចំពោះការធ្វើសន្ទរកថារបស់វាគ្មិនទាំងប្រមាណនេះហើយនឹងចាក់ផ្សាយជូនលោកនាងនៅក្នុងការផ្សាយទូរទស្សន៍ហើយនឹងវិទ្យុរបស់យើងនាវេលារាត្រីនេះបាទខ្ញុំបាទសូមអរគុណនិងសូមជម្រាបលាបាទ